Hello and welcome to Inside Iraq. I'm Taimur Nabili. The drawdown has begun, and after the end of August, we're told there will be fewer than 50,000 US troops in Iraq. But is this mission accomplished? Although the so-called combat brigades may be gone, they're being replaced by equal numbers of contractors. And just this week, on one day alone, 13 separate attacks across the country provided a chilling reminder of the perilous conditions confronting local forces. As Mike Hanna reports, not everyone is convinced that America's combat role in Iraq is really over.
An estimated 90,000 US soldiers and Marines have now left Iraq, leaving behind some 50,000 pairs of boots on Iraqi soil. This characterized by the US administration as an end to combat operations. But despite the semantics, it does not necessarily mean an end to combat.
As far as combat, there will only be engagement when we ask for their help according to the size or type of mission we are going to be doing. If we need their assistance, we are going to ask for it formally, and they will be engaged at that time.
In terms of a security agreement reached with Iraq last June, all US forces are due to be out of the country by the end of next year. But not being ruled out is consideration to extend their presence should the Iraqi government request this.
Certainly, if they ask us, we consider it. That's part of us developing a long-term strategic partnership with them that includes a security relationship. So we certainly would consider that. But again, they have not asked us. We'll wait to see what happens.
The debate about the US presence also fueled by the comments of senior Iraqi General Babakar Zabari, who publicly stated that the Iraqi military would not have full capability until 2020, and US assistance may be required through this period. His US counterparts in Iraq quick to play down the statement's significance.
What I think he was referring to is the type of technical assistance that the United States military provides to our partners in the region. If you were to visit Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Oman, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, we have a small military presence in those countries, assisting them with American military equipment that they've purchased, helping them train on it, helping them maintain it, and I suspect that is the kind of relationship that General Babakar was referring to when he made that comment.
US and Iraqi military leaders are all adamant that the nature of the future relationship will be determined at a government-to-government level. The process, though, is far from getting underway. There is as yet no Iraqi government in place, let alone a strategic policy. And in the flurry of new terminology used to characterize the present and future US presence in Iraq, one thing is clear. The key may have been handed over, but US forces are still locked inside. Mike Hanna for Inside Iraq.
Well, the Washington PR machine has been at pains to portray the remaining US troops as advisors to the sovereign Iraqi government and security services. But is that an accurate representation of the situation? I'm joined on today's program by Hoshyar Zebari, who's Iraq's foreign minister. He's in Baghdad. In Washington, D.C., Phyllis Bennis is director of the New Internationalism Project at the Institute for Policy Studies. And also in Washington, D.C., Bradley Blakeman, a former senior advisor to the former U.S. President George Bush and now a professor of politics and public affairs at Georgetown University. Welcome to the program, all of you. Thank you for being with us. Phyllis Bennis, I'll begin with you, if I might. The phrasing of this drawdown has been very cautious. The last combat brigade has left Iraq, we're told. What exactly does that mean?
Well, it means that we're going to call them something different. These are conventional combat brigades. These are brigades that are being what the Pentagon used to call remissioned, what the Washington Post is now calling rebranded, as something other than what they are, which is combat brigades. A new 3,000 brigade from Fort Hood left on Sunday night. This is the 3rd Armored Cavalry Division. It's a combat brigade. That's what's left, is 50,000 combat troops with a mission that officially does not include combat, but as Secretary of Defense Gates was very careful to say, they are prepared for combat, they are capable of combat, they will be embedded with Iraqi military units that will be engaging in combat, and within them are 4,500 special ops forces who will be continuing to engage in so-called counterterrorism attacks, meaning go after those who we decide are the bad guys. So this is combat.
Bradley Blakeman, is that how you see it?
On a smaller scale.
Yeah, I have to agree with Phyllis. This is semantics, call it what you want, but it's 50,000 combat troops that remain there. Our president is very desperate for any kind of achievement. Foreign policy seems to be the area he's concentrating on now. He needs to focus away from his domestic woes, and this is a good way for him to do that.
Foreign Minister Zabari, the Washington policy, it seems, is to whitewash the reality. How do you see it?
Well, I think this was President Obama's campaign pledge fulfillment, actually, pledge. He did pledge to the American public during the election campaign that he will withdraw all combat troops by August the 31st, 2010. And according to the SOFA agreement, or the agreement of withdrawal of American troops, all troops should leave the country by the end of 2011. So I think the process has gone smoothly. There would be forces, still a sizable force remaining in the country. 50,000 is not a small number. And in fact, their mission and their mandate is to advise and assist Iraqi security forces.
But the point the other two guests were making, Foreign Minister, pardon me for interrupting, is that however you want to describe this and however you want to interpret the words of the Status of Forces Agreement, nothing much has really changed in Iraq. These are still U.S. combat troops, and the situation and their activities will not really be much different, will they?
No, it would be different, definitely. I mean, this number, 50,000, has come down from 170,000, 140,000, so it's a huge difference. Secondly, the mission has changed, actually. All U.S. troops have left the main cities. They are in their barracks, you see, outside the cities, and they are embedded with the Iraqi security forces. So there is a major change, let's say, in the mission, in the operation, in the mood of carry out the operation and so on, and in the relations between their presence and the Iraqi military civilian authorities.
And Phyllis Bennett, surely that is the point. At the end of the day, you may be right. It may all be a slight semantic distinction, but at the end of the day, there are less troops and they are on the way out.
And having fewer troops, and if they are on the way out, that's a good thing. I think there is a big question here, however. The agreement, the SOFA agreement that the foreign minister speaks of, was of course negotiated not by President Obama, but by George Bush in the last months of his administration in 2008. In that agreement, it does say that all troops will be gone, but there is a huge loophole, which is that if the Iraqi government, which in my view is still dependent on the United States for its survival, decides that it needs U.S. troops, wants U.S. troops to stay, or if the U.S. decides it wants to keep troops in Iraq for all the same reasons they were sent there in the first place, which has to do with oil, which has to do with bases, which has to do with the expansion of U.S. power in the region. None of those reasons have changed. If the U.S. decides they want to stay, they certainly are in a position to put pressure on the Iraqi government. If the Iraqi government decides they want to ask the U.S. to stay, they could certainly take that initiative. So either side is really in a position to say, we'd like to renegotiate this and talk about keeping troops further in. Even if that doesn't happen, what's already underway is a shift, not, as we are being told, a transition from U.S. troops to Iraqi troops, but from Pentagon troops to State Department security officials. Thousands of State Department security people are being sent. There is the anticipation that there will be about 7,000 contractors sent who will be doing all the things that the military does, but they will not be controlled in the same way by the SOFA agreement, which only speaks of contractors under the pay of the Defense Department, of the Pentagon.
Right.
Those who are under the administration of the State Department, which will include planes, drones, armored personnel carriers, all of these things, which are military, but they will be officially part of the State Department rather than the Pentagon. They will be continuing. So there's a very severe danger,
let me put that to the Foreign Minister,
continue.
Mr. Zabari. What is going to be the role of these contractors? I mean, I know that the government is saying that they are in control of the contractor forces and the contractors are accountable to Iraq, but there's plenty of people who find a lot of danger in this arrangement.
No, I think this arrangement was devised to support the civilian diplomatic presence of the United States in Iraq. Definitely the embassy needs protection, the general consulate that there would be opened in Basra and Erbil, and some of the diplomatic offices in other towns all needs certain protection, security protection. The role of the private contractors, again, will be changed this time. Unlike before, when they had a free hand in the country, shooting at people and so on. No, I mean, this contractor would be subject to Iraqi law and jurisdiction.
All right, well, that's the theory. That's the theory, and it always has been the theory. But in practice, we have seen in the past that it's not always the case. Let me just change the focus of that for just a moment and bring in Bradley Blakeman, because there was an article in the New York Times only last week talking about the possibility that what is actually going on here is that the CIA and the Pentagon are changing their roles, that what we're really seeing is the use of contractors and a refocusing of the entire operation as a shadow war, a situation where we don't really know, the public doesn't really know who is running things and what the forces are getting up to.
Let me say this. Circumstances in Iraq will dictate what we do and what we don't do. If the Iraqis are standing up politically, militarily, the civilians are happy with their government, violence is low, Americans are going to stand down. But certainly we're keeping 50,000 troops there for a reason. The reason is to back up the Iraqi security forces and the government. But now it's the government's turn. They've been slow to react, where military has been able to keep pace. The political situation there is tenuous at best.
Let me bring it to Phyllis Bennett. The point here being, we have seen covert operations leading to things like Iran-Contra. Are we in danger here of seeing similar situations develop?
I don't think it's just an abstract danger. I think that's where we are right now. And I would criticize the New York Times for many things, but their coverage of Iraq now that they have Anthony Shadid there, I think is something of which they should be very proud and of which I have a great deal of confidence. But I think that what's very clear is that the notion of a contractor-driven secret war that will not be secret from Iraqis, but will be secret from U.S. taxpayers, is something that is a very serious danger. The notion that we are somehow standing up to a heroic Iraqi government that the people love and that is providing services has never been the case, and there's no particular indication that it's going to be the case anytime in the future. The Iraqi government is dependent on the United States. The government does not exist at this point. This is still a caretaker government from the last one, because after 6 months, the parliament has been unable to come up with a government. People are angry. I think that we see that. We've seen it in the press again today, in the New York Times among others, but many others, indicating the problems of lack of water, lack of electricity, lack of security. All of these things are being blamed on the Iraqi government and on the presence of the U.S., which has not been able to help the Iraqi people in this situation. The notion that somehow we're there to make sure they can make good on these commitments flies in the face of the fact that the Iraqi government, backed by the U.S., whether it was 170,000 troops or 50,000 troops, has never been able to provide for the Iraqi people those basic fundamental things that they need for a normal life.
Mr. Zabari, the Status of Forces agreement that George Bush negotiated was actually to a large extent determined by Mr. al-Maliki. He was the one that insisted on the withdrawal. Why have 50,000 remaining in the first place? Why do you want to have all these U.S. bases remaining in Iraq? And why the presence at all? Why not just get them all out at once and get on with the business of running the country by yourself?
No, definitely. We are running the country by ourselves. I mean, I'm surprised at the line of your questioning, you see, as if this country has nobody, you see, to care for. The Americans were here under certain international mandate. Now,
well, I mean, there are two issues there. There isn't a government, as Phyllis pointed out, but let's leave that to the side for the moment.
No, there is a government. Let me challenge you on this. Let me challenge you on this. Let me challenge you on this. There is a working government now. Yes, it is. Still, since March the 7th, we haven't formed the next government under the new election results, but there is a working, a caretaker government, whatever you say you call it.
Let's go with that then and bring that to... Let me stop you for a minute.
As a minister of this government,
Let me stop you for a minute there. Let me stop you for a minute there and bring in Bradley Blakeman. This is the line that Iraq has been trying to push ever since those elections, that there is a government. Do you agree? I mean, we know Phyllis doesn't agree, but do you agree with that?
Look, I give the Iraqi government, I give the Iraqi people great credit. Look what happened in March. 19 million registered voters.
That's not the question, though,
in Iraq, and 60% of those people voted. I have great confidence in the Iraqi people and the Iraqi government.
You may have confidence in the Iraqi people, but there is no functioning parliament.
They have to get their act together.
Government?
They have to get their act together. Yes, it's a functioning government. Is it functioning as well as it could be? The answer is clearly no, but they're trying hard. And they now know that 50,000 troops remain. Many thousands of Americans are leaving. We're going to continue this pace under this president. So sooner or later, you have to stand on your own. When they stand up, America will stand down. There is not going to be a shadow war. The American taxpayers are going to know what's going on in Iraq. The Iraqi people are going to know what's going on.
All right, Mr. Zabari, let me bring you back in here. If Iraq can operate for 6 months without a prime minister, then there's no need to even choose one. Presumably this state of affairs is possible to go on indefinitely.
No, definitely not. I disagree with that. We have to form a new government as soon as possible to fill this constitutional, political, security vacuum. This is a must for all of us, and people are frustrated. People went to the poll to vote. Their vote needs to be respected, definitely, and the efforts are ongoing, but really there are many complications. Don't forget that most of Iraq's neighbors now are interjecting themselves, interfering in backing and supporting one faction against the other. So it has not been easy, even this is not an excuse for the Iraqi leaders to expedite their efforts to form the government as soon as possible. But this has taken us longer than we expected.
Okay.
But it has not affected the withdrawal or the drawdown of U.S. troops. You see, there has been no linkage whatsoever. So even as the troops will leave by 31st of August, if there is no government, the troops have gone already. It's been a done deal. There has been no correlation between the two.
Let me ask you then, we saw this week 13 separate attacks across the country, the majority of them targeting security forces. And apparently it seems that there is the ability for these insurgents or these fighters to attack almost where they like, when they like. Does this cause you concern, and how is this related to the U.S. troop presence?
Well, this building I'm speaking to you last year was bombed. This is the Foreign Ministry of Iraq, and it was almost demolished. But we are back to work, you see, after 1 year, after rebuilding it, after going back to our full capacity. This is an ongoing war and challenge with the terrorists, with the insurgents. But this is expected, really. I mean, this struggle between the new regime and the old, between the extremisms of Al-Qaeda, of the remnant of the Ba'ath Party, will continue. Even if there would be another government, still you will face a certain level of these attacks.
That's an interesting comment. Let me bring in Phyllis Bennis. This kind of attack is expected to continue. How do you interpret that?
I don't think there's any question about it. The foreign minister is not saying anything new here, that these kinds of attacks have continued throughout the U.S. war. They began with the U.S. war. They are continuing now. The U.S. has been unable to prevent them. The Iraqi government is unable to prevent them. And I think that this is very much the consequence of the U.S. invasion and occupation from the beginning. We have seen this kind of...
In which case, I'll put to you the point I brought up a little earlier on. If these attacks are a consequence of the U.S. presence, why doesn't the U.S. pull out altogether?
This is exactly what should happen. The decision by President Obama to make a unilateral decision to pull out all but 50,000 troops in this interim period was not what was required by the SOFA agreement. The SOFA spoke of the withdrawal out of the cities that happened last year, and officially the full withdrawal by the end of next year. This was his interim position that he determined on his own. It's a good move to pull out more troops, certainly. Sending in more, as they just did from Fort Hood, in my view, is a huge mistake. But it doesn't mean that we have to wait until the end of 11. That's the final date, according to the SOFA agreement, by which all U.S. troops are to be out. Certainly, President Obama could give the order to withdraw them all in the next week and bring them home much sooner. I think that would go a lot farther to ending the violence in Iraq.
You're shaking your head. Why is that?
Well, Phyllis is playing right into the hands of the insurgents. She's absolutely 100% wrong. A cut-and-run strategy is not helpful to America. It's not helpful, more importantly, to the Iraqis or the region. A cut and run means pulling all our troops out and going home. This president was against the surge as a candidate. This president understood that it's much easier to campaign than to govern. And now he's the governor of America. And he realizes that he could not make good on his campaign promise, that as president, he had to make different decisions.
But
and what has he done? He's followed Bush's plan.
You and the Republican Party are also in some kind of problem here as well, aren't you? Because you want to criticize Obama simply because of who he is, but also you can't criticize the way he's handling this because that's exactly the same way Bush would have done it.
Look, we don't criticize Obama because it's sport. We criticize him because we disagree with him fundamentally on principle. But let me say this: President Obama is making this decision. President Obama is making this decision because it's in his interest to make this decision. That's why he's in big trouble domestically. He has to make good on his pledge, regardless of what the Iraqi situation may or may not be. Our generals are following his direction. I hope he's making the right decision, not only for America, but more importantly, the Iraqi people, because we invested a lot of time, energy, and most importantly, the lives of our men and women. So the Iraqis must step up now. It's their time.
Foreign Minister, there, as you can see, there is an enormous amount of dispute in the U.S. about what they should be doing here. There is absolutely no consensus about what the strategy is, let alone the tactic. Do you think that the current way that this is playing out is in line with what you in Baghdad want to see happen? And are you happy with the way the Status of Forces agreement is playing out?
Yes, we are happy. I think we have implemented our part sincerely, and the United States also, I think, have implemented their part very honestly and sincerely, and the process has gone so far smoothly. It is important for American domestic audience, I mean, this drawdown or the bringing down the number of troops to 50,000 or less by 31st of September. It is an important message for your audience. But really, from our perspective, from the Iraqi government, this has been part of the arrangements and the agreement under the SOFA. And that's why it will not impact other areas. I think, as I said earlier at the beginning of your program, this was a fulfillment of a campaign pledge by President Obama, and it has gone smoothly. There would be some ceremony on the 31st of August and so on, but really the troops have gone already, you see, and they are down to less than 50,000. Now we have another challenge, which is the government formation. It is our duty, but we expect from our friends in the United States, from the United Nations, and all those who care about a safe, secure, strong Iraq to support, to facilitate the efforts of forming the new government.
And I will have one final word from Bradley Blakeman in D.C. Do you think within a year all the troops will be gone, and do you think that's the right move?
It depends on the circumstances. If the Iraqis are able to stand up, we will gladly stand down and go home. If they're not, then we're going to stay at their invitation. If they want us, we'll be there for them. This president is not going to cut and run on Iraq. I don't think it's in his interest, nor is it in the interest of the United States.
And there we will leave it. Thank you all very much indeed. We've run out of time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And don't forget, you can watch this program online. Just visit our website, aljazeera.net/English. But that's it for this week's show. Join us again next week when we have another look inside Iraq. Bye-bye.